Salve omnes, welcome to this video lesson on section 23 of Fabulae Faciles, the third labor of Hercules, the Cerynean Stag. Now, I should say that the first two labors are essentially always the Nemean lion, from which he gets his lion skin, and then the Hydra second, from which he makes his arrows poisoned. After that, though, the order of some of the intermediate labors, the ones in the middle, do get mixed up in some of the different ancient sources. So while we're saying the third here for the Cerynean Stag, that's not always the third in all versions of this story. Now, the last three are always the cattle of Geryon, and then the apples of the Hesperides, and then Cerberus is the final one. So the first two and the last three are always the same, but sometimes the ones in the middle get kind of mixed up. All right, third labor, the Cerynean Stag. Sometimes this is the Cerynean Hind. Okay, a stag is the British English word for a buck, a male deer, and a hind is the British English word for a doe, that is a female deer. So that is, in some versions, this magical super fast deer is a male deer, a stag, and in some versions it is a female deer, a doe. Now, it seems that in the original version, as far as I can tell, it probably was a doe, but the reason that some later versions make it into a stag is, as you find out, it has antlers. It's often described as having golden antlers, and if you know anything about deer, typically if they've got antlers, they're male, right? So I think it's kind of, it was supposed to be a doe, it has the golden things, but then golden antlers, but then hey, that doesn't make sense, so some people said it was a stag. All right, here we go. Postquam Euristeo Caides Hydrae nuntiata est. After the slaughter, Caides, that could also be translated as murder, but here I think we're talking about the slaughter of the Hydra. Don't really think of it as murder. After the slaughter of the Hydra, Hydrae, was reported, nuntiata est, to Eurystheus, Euristeo, dative case. Magnus timor animum eius occupavit, a great fear took hold of his mind, occupavit. Occupare is a strong verb for grabbing or seizing. So it's a synonym of capio, capere, or perhaps prehindo, prehindere, something like that. And it is related to occupy in English. All right, so great fear occupied or took hold of his mind, occupavit. Iusit igitur Herculem, therefore he ordered, iusit, Hercules, cervum quindam ad se referre, to bring back, referre, cervum quindam, a certain stag. Okay, notice cervum, this is the masculine, cervam would be the feminine if we followed the other version of this tale. It would be cervam quandam if it were feminine. To bring back a certain stag, ad se, to himself, that is, to Eurystheus. Noluetenim, for he did not want, virum tantae audaciae, a man of such boldness or audacity, in urbe retenere, to keep in the city. So he didn't want to keep or hold back a man of such audacity in his city. All right, so if Hercules is hanging around in Tiryns or Mycenae, to follow a different version of this tale, it would endanger the kingship of Eurystheus. And hearken back to what I said about the fact that originally Hercules was supposed to be king here, according to Zeus's prophecy, but Hera subverted that by making Hercules' birth take longer and speeding up the birth of Eurystheus so that he was born on the day that Zeus said, the king of Tiryns and Mycenae would be born. All right, hic autem cervus, moreover, this stag, cuius cornua aurea fuisse traduntur, whose horns, cornua, are passed down or are said, traduntur, to have been, fuisse, perfect infinitive, golden, aurea. Incredibili fuit celeritate, was, and we would probably say of incredible speed. Incredibili celeritate is the ablative of description. In Latin, you can use ablative or genitive for these kind of noun phrases to describe something. And in English, we usually say something like of or with. So like with wonderful speed or of incredible intelligence, something like that, right? So these are noun descriptive phrases. So it was, fuit, of incredible speed, incredibili celeritate. And even though I'm saying of, that's just because it fits the idiom in English better. Here it is actually an ablative of description. Incredibili, that's an I stem ablative ending, and celeritate, a regular third declension ablative ending. All right, Hercules igitur, Hercules therefore. Primo, at first, vestigiis eum in silva persequebatur. Pursued, persequebatur, right? Notice that comes from sequor, the base verb for follow. Pursued it, eum. Now, I say it, but I could say him, and we mean the stag here. Eum is the masculine pronoun. Vestigiis, by means of its footprints. Vestigium is track, trace, clue, footprint. In its most basic sense, it's a type of trace or track, and of course it is where we get investigate from. So at first he pursued it by its tracks, vestigiis, in the forest, in silva. Deinde, then, ubi cervum ipsum vidit, when he saw the stag itself, omnibus viribus currere coipit, he began to run, coipit currere, with all of his strength, omnibus viribus. Usque ad vesperum currebat. He ran right all the way until evening. Usque ad vesperum. Neque nocturnum tempus sibi ad quietum relinquebat. Nor did he leave, neque relinquebat, nighttime, nocturnum tempus, for himself, sibi, for rest, ad quietum, or to himself for rest, to change that up a bit. Okay, that is to say he kept on running at night too. Frustra tamen, nevertheless, tamen, in vain, frustra. So even though he could run and run and run, Hercules could never catch this thing. And now this is pretty impressive. The Cerynean stag or hind, whatever you want to call it, supposedly the fastest creature in the world, and that's why Eurystheus sent him to catch it. Because, you know, like Hercules, I think I've mentioned before, he was the one to first put on the Olympic Games, according to myth, and he won all the contests, every single race of every length, right? So he is super fast, and, you know, if he can't catch it, this thing is crazy fast. Nullo enim modo, for in no way, nullo modo, that would be an ablative of manner. That's anytime you have an ablative phrase that basically tells how you do a thing, right? In what way, in what manner. For in no way, cervum consequi poterat, was he able, poterat, to catch up with the stag, consequi. Notice consequi again, another compound of sequor, sequi, that verb of follow, but when you put the con prefix on, often that con prefix tends to imply completion. So if you follow all the way through to the end, you catch up with a thing, right? So, nor was he able to catch up with the stag. Tandem, at last, postquam totum annum concurrerat, after he had run the whole year. Wow, that's a pretty long race there. Ita traditur, so it is passed down. So I think that little parenthetical, so it is said, so it is passed down, ita traditur, that's a way of saying, yep, that's what they say. They say you ran a whole year, right? But this is kind of unbelievable. Well, of course, all these myths are kind of unbelievable. All right. Cervum cersu exanimatum capit. He caught the stag, exanimatum cursu, made breathless, or perhaps exhausted, we might say, by running, cursu. So in this version, he just tired the thing out. Other versions that I'm aware of, he catches it with nets, right? So it's some sort of trap or net thing. In another version I'm aware of, he wounds the animal, and that slows it down. He doesn't kill it, but he does wound it. He shoots it, and that hurts the animal, and so it has to slow down because it can't keep up the same speed anymore. And I think that's a more common version of it, that he somehow has to wound it, because then Artemis, or Diana to use her Roman name, who holds all the wild animals sacred, she gets angry at him because this is a sacred, special, super fast animal, right? And he's just hurt it. So then she gets angry with him, but then he eventually, he, after all, just like Artemis, is a child of Zeus. So it's like, hey, my, half-sister here, I really didn't mean to do this, but crazy dude Eurystheus has asked me to, and I promise I will, put the animal back safely in the woods after it's recovered. Everything will be fine. So she eventually gives up her anger at Hercules. He convinces her that this is not really his fault. That's a more common version of this. Right. Et vivum ad Eurystheum retulit, and he brought it back, retulit, that's from referere retuli, redlatus. He brought it back, vivum, alive. Notice vivum is in the accusative because we're understanding the it, meaning the stag. And you can understand that because carewum in the accusative is in the previous clause. To Eurystheus, ad Eurystheum. All right, well, that concludes the 23rd section. Hope you learned a few things here, either about the story or about the vocabulary, grammar, or maybe just reviewed some things.